reduce trains coming into Penn by 20%, it will be a summer of hell for commuters.
That Governor Cuomo talking about service cuts that will start Monday, and they're due to emergency track work that will last all summer. Now, 20% of the rush hour trains on the LIRR, they're going to be cut. Some others will be rerouted, to Hunters Point or even Atlantic Ave in Brooklyn. Commuters are being urged to take the subway, buses, which are being added instead of the train. Now, things so bad expected, the Diocese of Rockville Center is producing a web series for Facebook that will attempt to help commuters cope. Now, here's Bishop Barra's explanation.
Living our faith in these tense moments, in these moments where the primal emotions are bubbling up in us, we want to really be there with you and to really help.
No locust to report. Now, it's not just Long Island we're talking about here. New Jersey Transit cutting service by about 25% into Penn Station, and Amtrak also reducing service and sending some Albany-bound trains to Grand Central instead. Now, we're going to be following this every step of the way here, particularly on Files 1. We're going to keep you posted about how it is going. To say it politely, this is a story that will have legs throughout not just July into August and hopefully not beyond that. We're going to be talking about what's happening, what's not happening, how it's impacting commuters. Politically, though, let's just say this thing's going to be a minefield. Now, the bickering's already started with the two participants you can always count on, that being Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. But the question is, how should and will this play out politically when it comes to the blame game? Who will the buck stop with? Well, let's bring in our panel right now. Richard Brodsky, former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, now senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent.
I blame Brodsky.
Yeah, well, you know, that was the third option, but I was going to let voters fill that in on their own. Okay, before we get into the blame game, you can't overstate, I think, for folks who've heard that this is coming, when it actually happens and people have to get off the train and take a bus, or they have to figure out, are they working off the weekend or the weekday schedule, and what's connecting, what isn't. I think that there is going to be palpable frustration and anger, especially when the temps get well into the 90s this summer. It's not an exaggeration. Forget about politically who gets blamed. We've gone through some of the math and how this is going to play out here. This is going to be a major headache.
I've already heard from commuters on Long Island who are leaving an hour plus early to try to get where they need to go because they don't know when the train's going to show up and they don't know what time the train's going to. So their commute is taking an extra long time in the heat, and you're sitting there. You've got the pressure of having to go to work or got some. I mean, this is miserable stuff. I mean, it's going to be worse than people who get stuck in traffic jams on the highways, and how frustrating that can be, because at least you can see what's happening on the highway, on the trains. You know, and if you're caught under, if you're caught in an underground stop, because this will also impact the subways, it's just going to be miserable, and it's going to spill over everywhere.
And Dominic, there are stories that write themselves, and particularly at the Post and the Daily News, they're getting ready for stuff that's front page stuff and even beyond that, because there's not only people being delayed and anger's going up, it makes for a two-word, big blaring headline in bold type, but then you'll get the stories of, people that didn't make it to the game, or somebody who delivered a baby on the train that got rerouted, and all the rest here. That a lot of stories in the naked city. Am I right?
Absolutely. Page one within the industry of print reporters is referred to as the wood. And so you have careful, Richard, writers and craftful writers that are already coming up with the 1- and 2-word headlines before the crisis hits. What Andrew said was so correct in terms of in the heat. In the heat. Folks are going to be hot. They're going to be frustrated. You don't know whether to blame the governor or the mayor, depending on which service you're depending on. And it's just going to be a big mess, and the press is going to have a field day with this.
All right. So then, Richard, we get to your favorite subject, which is the MTA, and where there's two. I'll ask one question, but it's got two parts to it. Who we think will get blamed and should get blamed, and explain to everybody, if it could, in TV digestible terms, how it works in terms of who's in control of the subways, who's in control broader of the MTA, who can make decisions what to open and close. To this point, the governor said Amtrak's the bad cop here right now, and if the mayor screws this really up, I might have to get involved.
I have never seen Andrew Cuomo make a mistake like this. he has taken ownership of the Titanic after they hit the iceberg. It's one thing to be at the Titanic when it's launched into the ocean. It's another thing to watch the iceberg rip it a hole in its side and say, here I am to save the day.
Well, explain how it's supposed to work in terms of
I'll tell you how it
accountability
does-
and explain
it does work.
politically.
The
what it
MTA
works.
is an independent regional authority that covers Westchester and Long Island and New York City and the subways and the trains, the buses. It was set up that way because it's a regional function and because you can borrow money better when you do it that way and because politicians did not want to have to raise the fare. Andrew Cuomo, in the face of this, Bill de Blasio doesn't have to worry. Andrew Cuomo has volunteered for this job. Now, what's even worse is he can't fix it in a year. You think this summer is going to be tough? Wait till next summer. And that's the summer of re-election. The people I know who know him and are serious about government simply have no explanation for why he would take ownership. He sort of bought it when he decided to be the guy about the 2nd Avenue subway and the tolls on Staten Island and the reducing the taxes, the MTA taxes in the suburbs. But he embraced it instead of running from it, and it's going to be a big enough issue to become the defining part of his reelection campaign.
New York City voters tend to be, or at least residents tend to know things. I think they're more high information folks on these things, except I bet you if you took an informal poll, Dom, who's in charge of the New York City subways? Most people would expect the answer to be Bill de Blasio.
By far.
And when Cuomo basically jumped into this one, to me, to Richard's point, I hate to agree with him, but even though it's really the buck stops with him in Albany, he made it clear that, look to me. I think he's right.
I don't know. I think I disagree with you two because I think that Cuomo was being preemptive as the governor, the top official of the state. And I don't think that New York City residents are going to blame him. I think they're going to turn to de Blasio.
Not what's showing up on Twitter. You don't have to worry about what will be starting Monday. If you look at the Twitterdom reactions to this, Cuomo's getting smacked around upside his head 16 ways from Tuesday all the time. De Blasio's silence and sort of calmness in this has had the political advantage of letting Cuomo cut his own throat.
So then why is Sal Albanese connecting with voters by focusing solely on the problems as a candidate for mayor on the transit system?
You don't really mean Sal Albanese.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
The man
I
who
do.
come in with 4.5% of the vote?
In the past, he didn't connect, but he's doing much better now, solely on the issue of transit problems.
Don't believe it. De Blasio is safe for re-election. He's safe in the primary. He's safe in the general election. And Cuomo's the guy who's brought
to me, Andrew, I thought that there was another convenient boogeyman here. Why not just blame Amtrak? And now, in reality, of course, they're not responsible for everything, including Penn Station and everything else. But they're a name that everybody can relate to. They haven't made their deadlines in terms of improvements. I know I'm throwing a whole blanket over this, but there were other bad actors he could have gone after.
You got to sell it to people, and it hasn't really been sold particularly well or in that direction as of yet. So, if things get bad, I expect that Cuomo will start banging on Amtrak a little bit, but it might be, it might be too little too late at that point. The worst case scenario, the best case scenario is if you can somehow make it Amtrak's fault, but I don't think that's an easy enough sell. Both de Blasio and Cuomo need to be careful here, and because if things get bad enough, people will blame them both, regardless of whether that's justified or not. And I've been waiting for 4 years to see if de Blasio and Cuomo can play nicely together. They can't. But if they realize this is an existential threat to them both, not necessarily on losing office, either they're both safe relatively for re-election, but that it can hurt their desire for a future
without
endeavors.
overhyping this, everybody, because we'll see how this will play out in real time, but short of a major storm that's impacted the whole region, this is going to impact the Long Island Railroad, New Jersey Transit, a lot of people in Rockland, and Dominic's nodding because he knows what I'm talking about. They will be impacted as well if they're right near and across the river.
North.
And Metro North
Hudson
as well.
Valley
Thank
has
you.
escaped so far. Don't look for it to escape straight through.
And as we say in the business, we will continue to follow. All right, coming up next, with the divisions of the Republican Party preventing the Senate from putting together a possible health care bill, are they any closer? We'll explain that and more after this.